and welcome to World Talks on TVP World with me, Ashim Kumar. At 8:40 p.m. CET, the International Space Station undergoes a change of command. Station Commander Alexey Ovchinin of Roscosmos will hand over command of the orbital laboratory to Japan Aerospace Exploration Agency astronaut Takuya Onishi, and will turn his attention to returning to Earth with NASA and Roscosmos colleagues after 220 days in space. Meanwhile, Elon Musk's SpaceX, alongside Palantir and Anduril, is leading a bold bid for the Pentagon's, quote, Golden Dome, a next-generation missile defense shield based in space. With space taking on a whole new significance, how do we expect these changes to influence our reality on planet Earth? Well, to explore that question, we're joined by John F. Hall, former director at NASA. John, welcome to TVP World. Thank you very much for taking the time.
My pleasure.
So let's start with the change of command in the International Space. You know, we don't hear very much about the International Space Station. People forget that this is a multinational group of people up in space for 220 days at a time. How's that going?
Well, it's going fabulously. It has been continuously occupied by human beings for almost 25 years. So more than 24 years, a multilateral, an international group of astronauts representing the United States, Europe, Japan, Canada, and Russia have been up there for almost 25 years, every single day working harmoniously, productively, successfully, safely. In some way, I suppose it's good that you don't hear a lot about it because it means things are going well.
Well, it's a piece of good news when you hear about all these tensions amongst nations on planet Earth.
Precisely. Right? If you think about specifically those tensions that we are having with Russia, for example, you think about what works between the United States, between Europe and Russia. Almost nothing, right? We don't cooperate on events in Syria. We don't cooperate certainly on matters in Ukraine. We don't cooperate on drug trafficking, human trafficking, or anything. But for almost 25 years, in and out every day, we have been working cooperatively, successfully together on the International Space Station. And that says something very important.
You say successfully. How do you measure or define that success?
Well, certainly for the advancement of science, there are real benefits that come from space exploration. And it's always worth asking, is space exploration worth it? And to look at the spin-offs and the technological advances that we get from doing work in microgravity in space. And there are countless numbers of them. Both in the medical field, for growing food on Earth, for managing emergencies, all sorts of things. But so successfully means that it's working. And that we're not having mishaps.
Right.
For 25
Important, especially when you're that far away from the nearest hospital.
Right. But you had mentioned the change of command. This is actually something that happens fairly frequently. An expedition, the expeditions are periods of time that astronauts and cosmonauts go to the space station. They can go from anywhere from 3 months to 6 months to, in some cases, extended periods. What happens is often when a new expedition comes up and one is leaving the station, there is a change of command. And there are a couple of kind of nice attributes that go with it. One is the passing of a key from the current commander to the new commander. And this key is retained by the new commander. And the key actually is just a replica of the airlock knob.
It's a replica, it's not the real thing.
Not the real thing. The airlock knob that connects the Russian segment to the international segment of the space station. Another nice tradition is the ringing of the bell, as is often done on ships. For example, when there's a change of command, when you welcome a new commander on a ship, they ring the bell. And that is something that a colleague of mine at NASA, when we worked together, a decade or so ago, a couple decades ago, brought to the station. The idea of he was a naval pilot,
so
and he brought that
it's
idea.
like whistling the new
Precisely, piping him on
onto board. Now, how much? Actually, before we get there, thank you for sharing this sticker with about the Polish Space Agency. Tell us about the Polish role in the International Space Station.
Well, Poland has had some experiments on the space station for several years. They've had companies that have put experiments on the International Space Station. But probably the most important thing that Poland is going to be providing to the International Space Station is going to happen in just over a month or so, and that will be the return of Poland to human spaceflight with a gentleman named Sławomir Uznański. And Sławomir is a scientist at CERN, at the Center for Nuclear Research. He's born in Łódź. He's about 41 years old. And he will be our second astronaut in space. Our first one, of course, was General Mirosław Hermaszewski back in 1978 on Soyuz 30. And that was a mission of about a week.
Right.
Sławomir will be up there for more than 2 weeks.
Okay. Now, I want to move on to another space-related area, and that is the so-called Golden Dome.
Right.
So this is about protecting against missiles in outer space. It's something that the US government is working hard on, collecting tenders on, and so on. And Elon Musk and SpaceX, along with a couple of other companies, seem to be the front runners for this. What's your view of the whole process and the need and likely effectiveness of the Golden Dome?
Well, it may very well be effective. The idea behind it is not only land-based launch vehicles, rockets, missiles that would go up, for example, as we have in Israel right now, right? The Iron Dome that they have, that's largely a land-based defense system. Here we're talking about not just a land-based system, but also a space-based system in which you have a constellation of spacecraft that are doing a couple of things. They are sensing and cataloging what might be coming in to the United States or to any other country that has this system, and also attacking with either lasers or with space-based missiles. And this is something of a moment for us to think about because back in 1967, when a bunch of countries, spacefaring nations, got together, the United States, the Soviet Union, and several others got together, and they created the Outer Space Treaty, which has governed space activities among all nations now since 1967 for well over 50 years. They said that space is a place that we should treat differently than Earth. We have already militarized the Earth and the seas, right? Space, we want to keep that for peaceful purposes. Now, it doesn't prohibit the placement of weapons, conventional weapons in space. It does prohibit nuclear weapons on other planets or in celestial bodies. But it's still a moment for us to reflect on, and maybe with some sadness that, okay, we are now going to militarize space fully.
Is that surprising? I mean,
No.
Looking at President Putin's attitude towards international agreements and peace agreement treaties and so on, or complete lack of care in keeping to them. Perhaps this is something that needs to be done.
I'm not saying that it isn't. Progress always comes with costs.
Yeah.
But it's still, I think, a moment for us to at least acknowledge something of a sea change. We have for a long time had reconnaissance satellites. We've had military activities in space, no question about that. But now we're talking about basing offensive weapons potentially in space, and that is something that we should take note of. I do think it has the potential to be effective, but I think we should also remember that it's very seldom in human history that we have not developed weapons that we haven't ultimately used.
Right. Well, as you say, we shall see whether, what happens and whether we'll need to use them. We all hope not. But in terms of the process of selecting the suppliers, now much has been made of the fact that Elon Musk's SpaceX is the front runner, although one does hear other commentary which says, well, actually it's very early on in the selection process, and we shouldn't be jumping to conclusions. What's your view?
Well, I'd like to remain hopeful. We have laws in the United States regarding conflicts of interest and corruption that I think need to be observed in situations like this, because Mr. Musk is not, of course, just an independent businessman. He happens to be someone who's very close with the current administration. And so I'm hopeful that as that process plays out, that it will be a level playing field for others to participate in. I'm also led to believe that the contribution that SpaceX would make is not necessarily with regard to the weaponization of the spacecraft. It's merely with the delivery. And that's something that he's already doing for the Department of Defense, for the intelligence community, for civilian operations like NASA, and for just people who want to pay for a ride, right?
Right. So it's simply more of what he's already doing, from what you say.
Right. His contribution to that, as I understand it, would be limited to the essentially the delivery.
Right.
The actual weaponization of the spacecraft, development of those, my understanding is that others would be doing that. But I am hopeful that the process will be one that adheres to long-established procurement laws and that pays attention to the vagaries of conflicts of interest and things like that that can undermine the fairness.
Understood. Now, just in the last minute or so that we have left, one of the things that Elon Musk has proposed is some kind of subscription agreement, whereby the U.S. government pays per use of his rockets. Novel. What do you think?
Well, I'm a veteran of U.S. government service, okay? I spent 25 years at NASA, 32 years in the United States government altogether. I believe that the government should own and operate those systems, or at least be the one making the decisions about when to use them, and not asking anybody when to use them, or not giving anyone else the opportunity to turn them off.
Right.
Without direction. So I would hope that the U.S. would have a very key role, any government would have a key role in the loop in making those decisions.
Over control.
Sure.
Understood. In total, are you aware of how many other consortiums are bidding for this Golden Dome?
As I have read, there's probably close to 100 different companies that might ultimately look to get involved, and probably well more than that.
Right.
We should also pay attention to the fact that a constellation like this is going to put up maybe 1,000 new spacecraft, and you consider we have over 10,000 operational spacecraft in operation right now around our planet. It's a busy place, right?
Getting busier by the moment.
Right. It's congested, it's competitive, it's contested, so also something to think about.
Understood. Unfortunately, Mr. Hall, we're going to have to end our conversation here, but thank you very much for sharing your description and analysis.
My pleasure, and I wish you a happy Easter.
Thank you, and the same to you, sir.
Thank you, sir.
And that's all from us in this episode of World Talks. Stay tuned, lots more coming up. Goodbye.